So, in this episode, I kind of want to sum up and reflect on the past couple of episodes because I think a lot of what this is about is a reclamation of the essential humanity and dignity of early baseball, right? And so we've gone into the Cuban leagues, we've gone into the Negro leagues, we've gone into early professional baseball in America through the quote unquote major leagues, the federal leagues as well. What this is really about is it's a dignified reclamation project of the real foundations of the history of not only the sport of baseball, but the foundations of nation building through lived mythology. What I mean by lived mythology is with the turn towards modernity, and again, I evoked this previously. You have the Nietzsche quote, "God is dead, and we have killed him." It's more complex than that, and ultimately more profound because what you have is you have a turn towards a direct, immediate, grounded mythology that's built in the dirt. It's built in the blood and sweat and struggle and toil of a real Jacob wrestling God moment in American cultural history and in global cultural history through sport. Sport becomes there's a level of primacy that sport takes in terms of a groundedness and immediacy of humanity that was not present in Greek civilization. Sport was more so a entertainment and theater for striving in the Greek sense, but you still have the traditional kind of Greco-Roman pantheon of gods and mythological traditions, which held and bound that civilization together very tightly. When you have the turn towards American modernity or Western Hemisphere modernity, you have nations like the United States or Cuba or Venezuela. They're searching in light of this fractured, self-assembling global identity. The nationhood is being shaken. The previously native, ethnic, religious foundations, cultural foundations are being shaken. What comes in to supplant that as an identity construct, as well as a sort of spiritual framework for existence, is the sport of baseball. And this is a global collective mythology that is being built in real time. Like the skyscrapers of New York City, for instance, it's being built by human hands. These legends are human beings, right? And so it kind of makes me think of the Michelangelo painting, that one kind of moment. I think it's the Sistine Chapel, where Adam and God are reaching out and touching hands. And really what it is it's not blasphemous, right? By any means, it's not. It's a spiritualization and a embodiment of the human ground of being, a transfer and an awareness that we are the ones who are on the field of life. And so when you have a figure like DiMaggio or Satchel Paige or Gehrig or Martin Dihigo, right? You have figures who are in real time this showing us our spiritual form and striving and athletic excellence and cultivation of self through the prism and medium of baseball. And I was thinking about this. I'll pivot a little bit because I'll share this image. Um, this was going to be another part of the kind of essay and image that I'm constructing here. I'll just pull it up right now. I was going to refer to the beauty and the power of Mickey Mantle's swing, right? And so what I mean here is Mickey Mantle's swing to me almost reflects the essence of baseball because it's a balance of uh, aesthetic beauty and power. And so again, we can again refer to Michelangelo or Da Vinci in terms of the sense of the divine proportion of the human body and the human body in movement. I mean, if you had Michelangelo working in the present day, you'd probably be making a sculpture of Mickey Mantle mid-swing, right? This is just a power of symmetry and technical perfection that emerges from athletic excellence, cultivation to craft. I was watching another one, a video the other day of Warren Spahn's windup, and the analyst of who was analyzing his windup for Sports Technique was talking about the fluidity and grace of his motion and how he generated power and force, but also craft in terms of technique and control of the movement, and thus where the bat or the ball is going. This is so much of what baseball is. It's a balance between the generative force of being and the technical perfection of athletic movement behind it. Baseball is much more of like a structural ballet than a sport like football or gladiatorial combat, etc. Because this is not a contact sport. This is not a violent sport. This is a sport of strategy and technical perfection. It's an athletic vision of excellence in which individuals perform great feats in coalition, but it's almost like in the physics sense, no two particles ever touch, right? It's a solo effort that's wound up in a mosaic of collective feats, not only on that individual diamond, but in the entire mythology of baseball itself. Of course, you have the rare home plate or outfield collision, but this is the technical perfection of movement. I think of Francisco Lindor at shortstop. He makes these incredible fluid plays, and you watch them unfold. It's like he slows down time. He himself is moving in slow motion. It's like time has been slowed to almost a stop because of how perceptive and engaged in the practice of fielding that he is, and how perfected his technique is, and how fluid it is. And this, to me, is the sign of athletic excellence and greatness, which is directly embodied. I've done a fair amount of work in physics. I've done a fair amount of work in philosophy. And these are all very cerebral, abstract pursuits that end in equations, so they end in logic tracts, right? What baseball is a total embodiment of the ethos and the ontology of being, right? And so what I mean by ontology is the real chain and real meaning of being, through embodied practice, embodied cultivation of technique. So I do a lot of weightlifting as well, and that's something that's very high priority for me. It's a balance between technique and power, right? Technique and strength. It's this constant mutualized practice. You build strength, you cultivate technique, you build strength, you cultivate technique, and it's this constant ecosystem of bosons and fermions, so to speak, the two particles that construct the universe. This is, again, it's very Nietzschean again. It's the Apollonian and the Dionysian, right? It's the two impulses, order and chaos, and they're always in the process of being balanced. When you look at Mickey Mantle's swing, this is just the direct embodiment of almost the universal ontology of being itself in power and cultivation of form, right? Power, strength, and control and technique, right? So there's these dual impulses that are at work consistently through baseball. And so when you have that seeded down into a very perfect medium, such as the game and sport of baseball, how it is played and performed, the pitcher, the hitter, the catcher, all of the fielders, they're all practicing this principle. And so what I'm really gesturing toward is this is something that people are making. And so when I say people are making it, it's a labor construct. And this is what we miss so much, I believe, as a modern civilization and Western civilization itself. There's a deification of not making. This is kind of contemporary ethos of the collective or culture. It's that in not making, or in my laziness, or in the fact that I'm not engaged with life and I'm not in this sort of passionate intercourse with the framework and field of life itself, I've achieved success. It's the idea of a CEO who's lounging on the beach in Cabo or something like that, right? It's this idea that once we stop doing this project, we've made it. It's the attempt to escape life. What I'm talking about is going deeper into life. I was watching this video actually. It's just someone who builds houses, and he kind of just turned to the maker of the video, and he said, I want my grandchildren to look at this and say, uh, "You're like my grandfather built this house, right?" This is the idea that undergirds the skyscrapers of New York City. This is the idea that undergirds the Steel City of Pittsburgh or the city of Detroit. These are cities that were made by creative innovation and active building. These are cities that were made by people who cultivated with detail and precision and aesthetic honesty and practice these beautiful landmarks, these artistic landmarks, these churches in small towns, or these post offices in small towns, which have long since been abandoned in the Appalachian or the Rust Belt. Uh, these are works of art, right? And these are works of art of American ingenuity and industrial ingenuity, the creativity of collective laborers. And baseball is and always has been the sport of labor. It's been the sport of the working class, the sport of those who do, right? Mickey Mantle, again, is just a perfect example because he comes from a mining family. I'm conjuring here a mythology, a legend, a spiritual consciousness that is very specifically American, which is a laboring consciousness, it's an industrial consciousness, and it's a consciousness of the working class. This is something that's kind of hitherto unprecedented, and it's something that is almost, it lives very close to Christ in the sense that Christ was a champion of the underclass, whether that was the prostitutes or the poor or those who struggled, right? So what you have unfolding in baseball is, I'm not going to say a Christian mythos, but a Christ mythos. It's a mythos of the working underclass, the labor class, who themselves, through their very participation, become these mythic, almost sort of Promethean, Herculean figures in their practice of bringing the spiritual center of being into consciousness, into life, into awareness, into the everyday, through this ironworks, through this forging of baseball. Again, right? Wood, steel, leather. These it's very very earthly and earthbound medium of the sport of baseball. So this is something that's just, it's crazy because of how unprecedented it is in a almost religious sense. And I do want to make that very clear. It's religious sense, really. It's this is through the creation of the sport of baseball, American culture and civilization itself is grounding down a centuries long history of mythological dissociation or abstraction of the spirit and force and life of being in a godly sense. And it's being incarnate into the practice, the ritualized spiritual practice of baseball. Again, blood, sweat, dirt. This is being ground down into the human being. And we are creating the mythological legends and central figures. Again, I said this in one of the previous essays. The United States is not, this is not an empire of intellectualism. It's not an empire of the arts really at all. It's an empire of baseball. So in Europe, you have Descartes, Voltaire, Nietzsche. In the United States, you have Mantle, Mays, Aaron, right? So it's a very different canon that we're working with here, and it's a beautiful thing. This is something that should be honored and respected and understood for the real contribution that it is. And that's a lot of the work that I'm doing here. It's to understand the American mythological and cultural framework for the beautiful creation that it is. Because what it does is something that's arguably more profound than what science can do, or philosophy can do, or what art can do, because it's a perfection of the craft, the creation of the craft of baseball, but then the perfection of the craft of baseball through these figures like Gehrig or Mantle. These are people who, as individuals, undergo significant trial and turmoil in their personal life, and they step onto the diamond, and they become these larger than life figures, but they are still deeply, deeply, deeply human. So in Greece, right, you have Perseus, or you have Hercules, you have these sort of stories of the the half man, half god, or the demigod figure, right? These people who straddle the two worlds, they straddle Olympus and they straddle the earth. This is what the sport of baseball avails America. And it avails America of this in a way that you don't have in Greece. You have a mythological abstraction. Hercules and Perseus are icons. They're iconography. They're sort of religious aspirational figures. So when you look at Christ or you look at Buddha, um, we're trying to find and create a contemporary mythic epicenter for culture and civilization as an act of spiritual striving toward which people move, right? This is a cultivation of spiritual excellence. And in America, it's through the devotional form of baseball, through the spiritual athletic practice of baseball. This is incredibly profound. And when you look at this picture of Mickey Mantle, you look at this mid stride, mid swing, this is, I mean, it's American beauty in action. It's American athletic form and excellence in action, because he is, you can tell by the leverages, by the angles, by the geometry of the movement pattern that he's cultivated. This is a man who's dedicated his life to baseball. He has made baseball the spiritual uh, sadhana of his life, and sadhana just means spiritual practice. Essentially, it's the everyday spiritual toil. Um, so you have these modern day monks, essentially, or aspirants, who through the sport of baseball rise into mythic legend. The mythic legend, which is itself the sort of iron pillars and steel girding of the civilizational skyscraper of America itself. It's a beautiful thing. And again, we have to look at the origins of this sport. It's Gehrig, the child of poor immigrants living in the Bronx, and he's sleeping in the YMCA and just working there as part janitor and part trainer. Mickey Mantle, the son of a miner, right? Um, Walter Johnson, a farmer. Dizzy Dean, his parents are sharecroppers, right? This is the real epic mythic foundation of America, and it's so much deeper and more profound than any abstract myth as a civilizational, spiritual, cultural, social, religious backing can avail any other civilization. So what America has done and did and is doing with the sport of baseball and its epic lens, its historical lens, right, which has now spanned almost 2 centuries. Um, what we're looking at here is the grounding down of spiritual truth, myth, grandeur into the blood, sweat, and grit of the athletic cultivation of greatness. Again, in the Herculean sense, in the Persean sense, is Hercules and Perseus are figures who undergo great physical trial, which is also spiritual trial, which is also psychological trial, similar to Christ in the desert, right? Christ fasting, Christ on the cross, right? These are all spiritual, physical, psychological trials. They're trials of the whole form of the human being. Um, these are the modern day myths, right? Without exaggeration, because what this avails us is, it's again in the Persean or Herculean sense, these are real people. These are people who come from, I mean, Satchel Paige, you don't even know how old he is, because he was born in such a rural, poor area of the American South. Um, there's no records for him. These are people who come from incredibly difficult circumstances, and they rise in the American civilizational sense. And it's not that they rise to a level of wealth where they all of a sudden become these people who disappear from the culture. They rise in a spiritual, mythological, epic sense to become the legends of American civilization. And it is that profound. So I want to leave you with this. I think this is solid here. Just this beautiful picture of Mickey Mantle. It's just the embodiment of athletic excellence, because it's just him and the ball, right? Total focus. Just look at where his head is and look at that line, the diagonal line that goes straight from his front foot to the back of his head. The perfect backwards L that he makes, generating force and leverage with the turn of the hip, right? The turn of the hip. and just the force and thrust that moves that bat through the plane of the strike zone. This is what the Greeks attempted to capture in stone. The American civilization is so much of what the Greek epic mythology attempted to conjure into being through abstract storytelling, mythology. Virgil, Ovid, Homer. You have a whole mythic epic tradition of the early Western civilizational constructs. Italy, Rome, Greece, Dante, right? It's a spiritual striving, and we have this as the historical lens of American civilization. We have this documented. It's in photos, it's in videos, it's in baseball cards. This is the completion, in a lot of ways, of the foundational Greek mode of consciousness, the foundational sort of teleology and epistemology of being, which is articulated by the Greeks. Heraclitus or Plato. Heraclitus, the cosmos is fire, all is fire and returns to fire. That's something that's brought up by Schopenhauer later on, that Nietzsche catches on to, in terms of striving and the will. The will is embraced here, and it's embraced on the diamond as a form of athletic striving. There's a concept for that in the Greek. It's called arete. It's the striving for excellence, or the striving for greatness. And the baseball diamond itself is the realm and the field upon which this occurs. So when you have people like Mickey Mantle, we look at Prometheus, or we look at Voltaire in the Western canon, there needs to be room made here. There's a different understanding that's been created here in the American civilizational context. And I would argue it's perhaps, and maybe even, a greater understanding. You have to avail yourself of the possibility of stripping away all of the pretense, all of the logic flows, all of the scientific formula, right? And in the attempt to understand reality and embrace this complete and total embodiment of athletic flow. It's called Wu Wei in the Tao. It's total presence, total focus, total embodiment through the practice and the toil. So Mantle kind of straddles this. It's like Perseus the monk, right? Garrig, Hercules the monk. It's a beautiful form that comes into incarnation in American civilization, and it's something that we don't really have political or social consciousness for before, and it's something that I would argue we do not really fully understand yet. So that's a lot of what this is about here. Good to see you. I'll catch you on the next one.